In a world where military might and pop culture unexpectedly collide, South Korea is not just setting trends with K-pop and K-dramas, it's also flexing its muscles as a military heavyweight. Imagine, if you will, a country ranked 28th in population, but punching way above its weight class to become the world's 12th largest economy and cultural powerhouse, now aiming to become an arsenal of democracy for the 21st century. With an impressive military lineup of 600,000 active-duty warriors and a tech arsenal that's the envy of the world, South Korea is the underdog story we all love, but with tanks and fighter jets. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Vaulting into the global arms trade arena as the world's 8th largest arms exporter, South Korea has inked a jaw-dropping arms deal with Poland, just shy of $14 billion. Watch out, because President Yoon Suk-yeol is on a mission to propel South Korea into the elite club of the top 4 global arms dealers by 2027, alongside giants like the US and Russia. So grab your popcorn, or kimchi if you prefer, as we dive into how South Korea is turning its sights from global stages and screens to battlegrounds and defense deals, all in the face of growing authoritarian shadows. The constant threat of North Korea has forced the South to become a heavily militarized society, even after it transitioned to democracy in the 1980s and 90s. All able-bodied South Korean men must serve in the country's military for at least 18 months. This service ordinarily must take place between the ages of 18 and 28, though men in the entertainment industry can delay their service until age 30. With the militarization of its population comes the militarization of its economy. Because South Korea is still technically at war with its northern neighbor, which claims all of its territory, it must make a steady supply of new weapons and other military equipment, and it must be self-reliant in doing so. 2 events made this need clearer to Seoul. The first was in a series of provocations by North Korea in 1968, including the attempted assassination of President Park Chung-hee that January. The second was a reduction in the size of the American forces stationed in Korea in 1971. As a result, South Korea embarked on a program to build a robust domestic defense industry. This included investments in shipbuilding and to localize the production of equipment like tanks and artillery. The program paid off, and because the threat from the north never ebbed, South Korea's economy is always in some sense in war mode. Seoul's defense spending has never fallen below 2% of GDP. The lowest it got was 2.3% in the early 2000s. In 2022, amid further rising tensions with the North and China's growing assertiveness in the region, South Korea spent 2.7% of GDP on defense. Although South Korea is a security partner of the United States and uses American weapons, it's become a major producer of arms in its own right, thanks to its high spending and its policy of nurturing its domestic defense companies. South Korea's aerospace and defense industry now has a market size of $4.46 billion and is expected to grow to about $7.9 billion by 2029. South Korea does heavy business with American defense contractors like Lockheed Martin and Boeing, but its domestic companies have become powerhouses in their own right. Korea Aerospace Industries Limited, Hyundai Rotem, and the Hanwha Corporation round out the top 5 in the country alongside the American firms. Among others, Korea Aerospace manufactures the FA-50 Golden Eagle trainer and light combat aircraft. Meanwhile, Hanwha is now the world's largest howitzer manufacturer. These 3 companies, along with LIG Next One, which specializes in missiles, communications, and electronic systems, are now 4 of the world's 100 largest defense companies. With such companies, South Korea is already the world's 8th largest arms exporter. This is 3 spots higher than in 2017, when it was ranked 11th. South Korean military exports grew by 94% between 2008 and 2018, a rate that only Turkey bettered. Just between 2021 and 22, South Korea grew the value of its arms exports from $7.25 billion to $17 billion. South Korea is already the 3rd largest arms supplier to countries in NATO, with Seoul providing about 5% of the alliance's arms purchases. However, this is a small sum compared to the United States, which supplies 65%, and France, which supplies about 9%. President Yoon Suk-yeol has plans to take South Korea's burgeoning defense industry to further heights. He has made it a priority of his administration to make South Korea one of the world's 4 largest arms exporting countries, alongside the United States, Russia, and France. Yoon plans to accomplish this goal by 2027, the year he will leave office. One of South Korea's signature arms deals is the $14 billion agreement it struck with Poland in August 2022. Poland promises to be a good customer for South Korea in the near future, as it's spending 4% of its GDP on defense, with no sign of cutting back while under constant threat of an aggressive Russia. Poland's geographic position guarantees that it will need a steady supply of weapons in the immediate future. With Russian Kaliningrad to the north, Russian vassal state of Belarus to the east, and with Russian forces advancing in Ukraine to the southeast, Warsaw cannot afford to slacken its defense spending, leaving ample room for Seoul to create a long-term, profitable partnership. Among Poland's purchases from South Korea include 1,000 K2 main battle tanks, 600 K9A1 self-propelled howitzers, 288 Chunmoo MLRS rocket artillery pieces, and 48 Fa-50 fighter aircraft. According to Polish officials, the speed with which South Korea offered to manufacture these weapons was one of the most important reasons why they decided to ink the deal with Seoul over its competitors. In contrast to South Korea, Germany has not spent 2% of GDP on defense since the end of the Cold War. Even in 2022, amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it spent only 1.4%. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz vowed to hit the 2% benchmark after the invasion, but this will take time, and many, including in Poland, remain skeptical that it will happen at all. The low levels of spending mean that even though Germany is a major arms supplier for countries in Europe, it lacks the capacity for fast delivery. For example, in 2018, Hungary ordered 44 Leopard tanks from Germany. 5 years later, only one of them had been delivered. In contrast to the long waiting times involving the German products, the first delivery of the equipment that Poland purchased from South Korea arrived within 3 months. One European defense industry executive summed up South Korea's advantages. They put things together in weeks or months that would take us years. Those are years that Poland simply does not have. South Korea has even offered to produce some of the weapons destined for Poland within Polish territory to make delivery easier. 500 of the K2 tanks and 300 of the K9 howitzers will be produced under license in Polish factories. This feature is part of a general policy among South Korea's defense companies, which understand that to ensure a steady level of international goodwill, it's better to set up some infrastructure in the purchasing country to create local jobs and build up international human capital to help with research and development. The government in Seoul helps its domestic defense firms in carrying out this business model. Meanwhile, because it manufactures in bulk, South Korea's defense products are more cost-efficient than those of other countries. It also helps that support vehicles and spare parts tend to come packaged in the deal. To make matters better for the Poles, the long alliance between South Korea and the United States has ensured that the Korean defense sector is compatible with NATO standards by default. Any country within the alliance will be able to use the equipment that South Korea produces. For example, the K9 howitzer uses NATO standard 155mm artillery shells, and its fire control systems can easily be integrated into NATO's command and control network. The K9 is also cheaper than similar systems built in Western countries. In the longer term, the deal with Poland offers South Korea the possibility of setting up manufacturing and distribution infrastructure in Europe as a whole. This will make it far easier for South Korea to strike up arms deals with other European countries. There are already signs that the move is paying off. OK1, one of the officials in Hanwha who negotiated the deal with Poland, said, "The Czech Republic, Romania, Slovakia, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and others were thinking of buying defense products only in Europe. But now it's more well known that you can buy at a low price and have it delivered quickly from Korean companies." Poland is far from the only partner in South Korea's quest to become one of the world's top arms exporters. The war in Ukraine shocked all of Europe into spending more on its defense, and although the market there is highly competitive, South Korea is now in position to take advantage of the continent's growing demand for weapons in the face of an aggressive Russia. Seoul already has other relations in Europe to work with beyond Poland. Norway and Finland both operate the K9 howitzer. Both countries ordered their respective units in 2017. They have since increased their orders in the face of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Estonia is also an operator. In 2018, it made an initial purchase order of 12 units. The following year, it exercised an option to order an additional 6. Delivery began in 2020, and by the end of 2023, Estonia had a total of 24 K9 units in its arsenal. It understandably plans to increase that number to 36. Europe is not the only region that South Korean weapons are popular in. In January 2022, Hanwha completed a deal to sell $3.5 billion worth of missile systems to the United Arab Emirates. The unit in question was the Chonggung-2 KM-SAM, which the UAE intended to use as a mid-range layer to its overall air defense network, acting in capacities where its American-made THAAD and Patriot batteries failed or were inappropriate. Elsewhere in the Middle East, South Korea and Saudi Arabia made an $800 million deal in 2022. Taken with other agreements, South Korea and Saudi Arabia have concluded deals worth a total of $989 million. The items involved in these deals included ammunition, Chunmoo MLRS units, and electro-optical systems. This burgeoning defense partnership expanded in February 2024, with both countries signing a Memorandum of Understanding. As part of the MOU, Seoul and Riyadh will create a working group for weapons systems R&D. That same month, South Korea struck a $3.2 billion deal with the Saudis to export 10 KM-SAM air defense systems. Although Turkey is a competitor in the international arms market, Ankara has also expressed interest in South Korean weapons technologies. Turkey's Altay, the first domestically produced main battle tank since World War II, uses some of the technologies in South Korea's K2. In 2021, Seoul and Ankara signed a contract permitting the K2's DV-27K engine to be used on the Altay. Delivery of these engines began in 2023. Overall, South Korea's weapons exports to the Middle East grew by 10 times between 2013 and 2022. Meanwhile, Australia inked a $4.7 billion deal with South Korea for 129 Redback infantry fighting vehicles in July 2023. These vehicles are set to replace the M113 armored personnel carriers, which have been in service in Australia since 1964. Hanwha beat out Germany's Rheinmetall company and the competing Lynx IFV in the bidding process. The Redbacks will be assembled at Hanwha's facility in Victoria, Australia. According to Kim Da-young of Hanwha, many countries in Eastern Europe became interested in the company's next-generation IFV after the deal with Australia was announced. Because of its deal with Poland, South Korea will be in position to exploit this interest if purchase orders are made. Elsewhere in the Indo-Pacific region, South Korea is building a burgeoning relationship with Malaysia, one of the countries on the front line of the South China Sea dispute. Aside from Poland, Malaysia is one of South Korea's biggest arms customers. Between 2017 and 2021, Malaysia purchased $2 billion worth of military equipment from South Korean companies. On March 7, 2023, Malaysia announced it would be purchasing 18 FA-50 fighter jets at a price of $910 million. In the bidding, the South Koreans beat India's Tejas and the JF-17 Thunder, a joint production between China's Chengdu Aircraft Industry Group and Pakistan's Pakistan Aeronautical Complex. South Korea also has weapons export agreements with India, a country that's also seen increased tensions with China over the disputed border between the two. In 2015, India agreed to purchase 100 K9 self-propelled howitzers. All of these were delivered by 2021. In September 2022, amid increasing militarization along the disputed border, India ordered a new batch of 100 more K9s. New Delhi says it has plans to order 100 more to bring the total to 300. There is much further room for growth with South Korea's aerospace and defense industries. Seoul is producing a new domestic jet fighter, the Kai Kf-21 Boramae, which had its maiden flight in July 2022. The South Koreans plan to introduce the new fighter, an advanced fourth-generation aircraft, into service by 2026, have an initial unit of 40 by 2028, and a full fleet of 120 by 2032. Although the Boramae is not a true stealth aircraft, it does have several low observable features. These include the shape of its fuselage, the canted twin tails inspired by the F-22 Raptor and F-35 Lightning II, and edge alignment. With the Boramae, South Korea wants to develop a plane that will exceed earlier fourth-generation fighters like the F-16, while being more cost-competitive than the F-35. As such, its price is expected to be significantly lower than the Lightning II, making it an attractive option for countries looking to upgrade their air forces without breaking the bank. The Boramae is a triumph for South Korea's arms industry in another way. Once it comes off the assembly line, South Korea will become one of the few countries in the world that's produced its own advanced supersonic fighter. But South Korea's desire to become one of the world's 4 biggest arms exporting countries does not guarantee it will produce the wanted results. As the deal with Poland is by far the highest profile one, it will need to be a success if South Korea wants to prove itself an attractive partner for future deals of similar magnitude, and the partnership has hit some turbulence. In February 2024, there was a heated debate within South Korea's legislature over 2 bills aimed at increasing the total capital of the Export-Import Bank of Korea. This increase was necessary to finance the second phase of a deal with Poland, as the bank was nearing its lending limit. No more than 40% of its equity could be loaned to a single borrower, a threshold close to being exceeded in dealings with Poland. The tumult came amidst the lead-up to the hotly contested legislative elections held on April 10th. On the last day of February, the increase of the bank's capital to $15 billion passed. The banks can therefore further finance the Korean defense company's export deals with Poland. However, the legislation passed haphazardly. According to one official in the South Korean legislature, speaking anonymously to Reuters at the beginning of the month, the financing bill was passed only in the nick of time. There won't be a chance to pass the bill for at least some months, if not passed in February. Given the involvement of sensitive export talks and schedules, it needs to be now. Turbulence in the partnership came from Poland's end too. On October 15, 2023, Poland's previous ruling Law and Justice Party lost its majority in the country's parliament, and a new government with Donald Tusk as prime minister eventually formed. As the debate in South Korea over the Export-Import Bank's capitalization raged, Poland's new government was debating whether it should continue with the previous government's purchases and take the new loan from South Korea to make them. Tusk declared that there was a problem with Seoul's terms. Although the new government said it would honor the contracts that have been concluded, it leaves room to back out of the new rounds of purchases financed by new loans. So far, Warsaw has made no such announcement. There are technical challenges too. One of the more prominent ones is the lack of engine expertise. The F-A-50 relies on the American F-404 engine, while the K-2 tank is dependent on Germany's Renk transmission system to operate. The Redback and K-9 howitzer are also reliant on German engines. Even South Korea's new fighter, the Boromai, relies on twin F414GE 400K engines made by the United States General Electric Company. Only 65% of the KF-21 is of domestic origin. So far, South Korea has not been able to shake this reliance, which has produced some problems with its efforts to localize the manufacturing of its weapons platforms. The KM-SAM air defense units for the UAE have also still not been delivered because South Korea is waiting to complete the development of the unit's new Block 3 AESA radar. Perhaps this is appropriate, but since fast delivery is supposed to be one of South Korea's major competitive advantages in the global market, it must be careful that the slow delivery in this deal will not dent its reputation. South Korea is also in competition with Turkey, the only country that grew its international arms exports by a greater margin between 2008 and 2018. Turkish weapons, particularly its Bayraktar TB2 drone, proved themselves in the Armenia-Azerbaijan war in 2020 and in the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Industry watchers in South Korea warn that if the Turks can make their arms exports more price competitive with credible technology, currently Seoul's major market advantages, Ankara could be a major stumbling block in Yoon's path to making his country the world's fourth largest weapons supplier. However, if current trends continue, Yoon has a good chance of making his vision into a reality before he leaves office. Because the Korean War never truly ended, Seoul was never able to take advantage of what French President Emmanuel Macron called the peace dividend that followed the collapse of the Soviet Union. The Red threat to Europe ended in 1991, but it never ended on the Korean peninsula, and as such, South Korea had no choice but to keep its population and industry in a state of high readiness. Now, as conflict returns to the world, South Korea might consider itself lucky and is ready to take advantage of the new trend. Since the 1990s, South Korea has profited immensely from the Korean wave, which saw the exploding popularity of K-pop, K-dramas, Korean wetboons, and K-beauty products. Now, as the world has reached the end of history, with increasing competition between liberal and authoritarian powers, a new Korean wave is taking shape. Upon visiting the offices of Hanwha Aerospace in December 2023, President Yoon wrote in the guestbook, "I support the bold challenge of K-defense. If he has his way, K-defense will be as big a part of the post-Cold War era as the first Korean wave was in the beginning of the 1990s. Perhaps he hopes that the K9A1 self-propelled howitzer and the KF-21 Boromai will be as popular with policymakers as BTS and Blackpink are on the music charts. But will he succeed? Do you think South Korea will become one of the world's 4 biggest arms dealers by the end of the decade, as President Yoon intends? Don't forget to let us know in the comments. Also, make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons to support the channel and get more military analysis from military experts. Now go and check out why every Russian weapon sucks and no one will buy them. Or click this other video instead.